when you think of Nike, you just think of this global brand of huge success. Struggles he had to go through for the first 15 years, lack of cash flow, on the edge of his seat of bankruptcy. But what he did all the way through was he believed in it.
This is amazing. I definitely want to read it.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the books that we've read over the years.
A lot of people out there really want to do something and just fail to get something going, and then that just leads to massive frustration.
I'm not going to let this get the better of me. I've put too much work in to let this fail.
Yeah, it's a key trait for anyone getting into any kind of business, including property.
Honestly, it is a masterclass in don't give up.
Building wealth through property isn't about chasing big deals and paydays. It's about owning assets that make money for you consistently. But figuring it all out on your own, that's where most people get stuck. That's why we created this Property Life membership. It's everything we wish we had when we started. Expert guidance, real-world case studies, and a private community of investors actually doing deals, not just talking about them. So you could spend years trying to piece it all together yourself, or you could plug into a system that's already working for our community. Check out our membership page at This Property Life. Everything you need to know is right there. Success is a team sport. Come join in.
Before we jump in, let's tackle one of the biggest hurdles for property investors: finding the best buy-to-let locations for top returns. Over the years, we've helped countless individuals pinpoint the most profitable locations and maximise their rental income. To make it easier for you, we've put together a free guide to buy-to-let hotspots for 2025, designed specifically for you to understand the market, stay ahead of the trends, and it even includes a list of our top 10 locations in the UK. Get it now for free by clicking the link in the description below and start building your property portfolio today. Hello and welcome to This Property Life podcast. I'm Sarah Blaney, one of your co-hosts, and today I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Nick Claydon. How in the world are you, Nick?
Right, actually, yes. The sun is shining. Spring is kind of thinking about springing, whatever it is. Yeah, good. Yeah. Very good.
And we find ourselves on World Book Day.
It is World Book Day. By the time this episode goes out, it will be probably a week after. But we're on World Book Day. So what's our subject, Sarah?
So it's really about what you're going to dress up as today, Nick. I think that's probably what the viewers and listeners want to know.
Okay. Well, my kids decided they were just going to be lazy and went in their pajamas and then found a book that was relevant to being in pajamas. So thanks, David Williams, for that one. But yeah, no, I haven't dressed up today. I don't know what should I dress up as?
I don't know. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the books that we've read over the years that we've really enjoyed. And, you know, if they come up with some little themes of what you can dress up as later, Nick, then all the better.
Well, I was going to put my gym gear on. I was going to talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger's book. That's one of my faves. So I could do that. I go and put my muscle top.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll just put some Nike stuff on because I'm going to talk about Shoe Dog. So we're just both going to get into our gym wear.
Right, okay.
Easy. It's not like the kids learnt laziness from us.
Right. So what should we do? Top 3 or just faves, and we'll just...
Yeah, let's go for some faves and then we can just list some quick fire ones towards the end of... Oh, and don't forget to read this and don't forget to read that. So, I mean, why do you even read books, Nick? I mean, you know, what does it do for you?
Well, yeah, I think for me, I mean, I've always been a reader anyway. I love reading. So I read a lot of fiction as well as, you know, for one, I never know what the best term is, self-improvement books, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, you know, I read a lot of fiction. I read a lot of non-fiction, and, you know, so whereas probably 15 years, it's probably 90% fiction, 10%, you know, self-improvement or whatever. It's probably now flipped the other way around. For the last 10 years, I would always have some kind of self-improvement, inspirational book, biography, something on the go alongside any fiction I'm reading. So what I get out of them is just lots and lots of ideas, lots of examples. I'm kind of a practical person, so I like to see examples of how people have done things. You know, you get some real outliers and you think, well, I couldn't probably do what they do, but you can always take something from it. Always, you know, but I think the vast majority of these books that you read, most of the people are actually quite ordinary. They just had either a really strong idea, really strong commitment, vision, something that they wanted to change, or, you know, a real driver behind them to do something different. But I think there's always something you can take that you can apply to yourself and your own situation and think, well, if that person could do that, then why can't I do that? In fact, one of my books is Duncan Bannatyne's first one, which was Wake Up and Change Your Life. Sorry, that's his second one. His first one was Anyone Can Do It. I'm going to kind of talk about both of them, but it's just that's what really caught me about that one was the title of Anyone Can Do It. I thought, yeah, right. But I'm sure not everyone can do it. But when you actually read it, the way I still don't think anyone could do what he did, but the way he writes it is like, why can't I?
Yeah, I think that's motivation, isn't it? So I think that's definitely why I think a lot of people read, I don't know, let's call them self-development books for now, because the ideas, inspiration, remotivation, accountability. And I think that's probably the key things, isn't it? And of course, we don't have to just read them nowadays. We can get them on Audible or, whatever. And indeed, there's even little hacks out there where you don't have to read the whole book for those of us that have got a short attention span. We can, log on to things like Blinkist and get the synopsis. And, I don't have a particularly short attention span, but it is getting shorter as I get older. But, there are some books that I'll read, and I'll read the first kind of 2 chapters and go, I know where this is going. I've got it. Yeah, I've got it. Don't worry. And there's some that I just stop reading because I'm like, I'm all over that. So actually Blinkist is probably quite a good thing for some people who don't really want to get into the nitty gritty of it and just need a quick, sharp motivation.
Okay, I've never done that. So I'm a bit more probably of a detail there. I like getting into the detail of it. I like really questioning, well, look, how did you actually do that? What I need the detail. I need to know so that I can maybe try and model that. So I kind of like to absorb as much as I can and to take then the.
Do you write note on the margin and all that sort of stuff?
I highlight because I mainly kind of use a Kindle now, so I would highlight. Yeah, I
think we've all got our little nuances and different ways of doing things, but let's go on. Let's jump into a book. So bring up your first one. Was it Duncan Bannatyne?
And kind of amalgamate is 2 because they're both, there's follow-ups kind of the same. The first one's more autobiographical for Duncan Bannatyne, and if anyone doesn't know who he is, go look him up. I'm not going to kind of go into a big background, but you almost certainly, if anyone what you're listening would have probably seen him on Dragon's Den. I think a lot of people have watched that program. He's been a mainstay on Dragon's Den, and he was for a long time. So I was always really fascinated by his story because he comes across as like kind of really gruff and very Scottish and very kind of angry a lot of the time. But actually, when you read his book, and I've actually met him very briefly at an event, sat on a table just behind him and just went and introed. I'm sure he's instantly forgot. I was. But anyway, it's very interesting to just meet the guy. But what I really liked about his book, his first one's called Anyone Can Do It. And he really just kind of spells out just what he did. And I think, so just to kind of summarize, he didn't start any kind of entrepreneurial activity till he was mid-30s. He was in the armed forces, in the Navy, I think. Yeah. And got booted out, dishonorable discharge. And he kind of found himself living in Middlesbrough, I think, at the time. Mid-30s, like not a penny to his name. Okay, wake up, got to do something. Otherwise, he could see the direction his life was going in. And his first venture was in ice cream vans, where he just saw an opportunity. Cobbled together the money to buy an ice cream van, negotiated a good pitch, in the local park. It's all from memory. I haven't got the book tag because I've got his second one here. And just that first bit made me think, well, he's not the first person to ever do an ice cream van. He's not invented the ice cream van, right? So I think a lot of people, when they think about getting into any kind of entrepreneurial activity, think, I've got to come up with this amazing idea that no one's ever thought of.
Unique. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what he's just like, no, you don't need to do that. You just need to do something. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just start something. So we bought an ice cream van. As I said, part of that was, what I liked about it, he had to cobble the money. He didn't have the money to even buy an ice cream van. It wasn't expensive. I can't remember off the top of my head how much it was, but not a huge amount of money. But he had to like cobble that together from friends, family, buy the van. And then he had to negotiate where to put the van, the pitch, to get a good pitch. And that was, gave me some really good insights into negotiation. And then, he could have just stuck at one ice cream van and kind of done all right. But he realized that if it works once, it can work 2, 3, 4, 10 times. So he started scaling that up and, buying more ice cream vans. So, and that just started from that. I'm going to do something. Okay. Ice cream vans. and it doesn't matter what it was. It was just find it, make it work, negotiate hard, scale it. And then he sold that business, and then he was sitting, this is kind of back in the late 80s, he was sitting watching TV or something, and there was an advert in the paper he saw about the government providing care home operators with funding. And in his book, he says like 99% of people would have just either not even heard that or not acknowledged it. But there's something about that. He just thought, hang on a minute, what, the government are paying people to run care homes? So he basically immediately just twigged that. He wrote it down, investigated it more, found out exactly what the government were going to be paying. I just did the maths. It was just like, this is a no-brainer. Why do care homes? So I guess that's a big leap for people, is to think, well, from having that thought to actually putting it into action is the big kind of gap, I think. And I think you're interested in that kind of story, go and read it and see how he did it. Because it really was about just having that idea, doing the maths, back of the fag packet. I always talk about back of the fag packet numbers, like, when we were doing our hotel in Edinburgh, Stafford Street Hotel, it all came from just back of the fag packet numbers. It was literally get the calculator, right, what do we think, based on quick research, what's room rates in Edinburgh? Okay, 200 quid a night. We can get 15 runs out of this building, 30 nights. What's our occupancy rate? Probably let's do it on 70%, having done a bit of research in Edinburgh. And straight away, we could see potentially gross income of 63 grand. And then you can kind of work that per month, times 12 months, 750 grand. And you work it all back from that. And we could see, well, if we could buy the building for this and we spend that on it and then we refinance, blah, 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 that could work. And actually, that back of the fag packet numbers in our first year, we did 725.
So, I mean, if you're looking at it from the example you've just given and also translating that back to what you said about Duncan's book, it's getting started, spotting an opportunity, don't overcomplicate it, and then follow through and do some action to simplify.
That's it. And that's what he's all about. It's just like, it doesn't matter what it is almost. Great if you've got a passion for something, amazing. He didn't have a passion for ice cream or care homes. Saw the opportunity and thought, numbers is all about numbers. If you ever watch Dragon's Den, he's just all about numbers. Do the numbers. It's like, why wouldn't we do this? Right, let's go. What do we need to do? And then he just starts pulling it all together. And if you read the story of the care homes, it does resonate a lot with what we do in property. It's kind of the same kind of thing, because he basically had to think about his financing. And this is the bit of the book that I remember really stuck with me. He realized the opportunity wasn't in converting old care homes. It was in building new ones, because he could see that the market really was people who wanted better facilities. They wanted their own en-suites. He actually his research was, he went and talked to his mum and all his mum's friends, and they looked at if they were going together, what would they want? So that's what he did. And he kind of ended up building one, and he had to put all his money into it, refinance his house, remortgage everything, borrowed money from everywhere to get this done, all knowing that he would get all his money back on the refinance based on the income that the government were providing. That was, his numbers was that. It's like, the government are paying me X amount per guest. Therefore, I know lenders will lend a multiple of that number, and that's where I get my money back.
Yeah. So it's risk at the beginning in terms of he's got to get through the build, but he knows his back end.
Yes.
He's de-risked it because of the opportunity he spotted.
Yes. And to get it over the line, he had to have a full building, right? So when the surveyor came out, they had to see all the rooms were full, right? So he's pushing ahead with this. He's got his bank lending. The surveyor's coming out and he's not full. And he knows he's got to be full. So what do you think he does?
Mum in.
He got his mum in. It's exactly.
I did it. Brilliant. Love it.
He got his mum and all his mum's friends, and they all went and took a room and moved all their stuff in. And so when the survey went round, it was like, rooms full, rooms full, rooms full. Brilliant. Signed it all off. There's the numbers, bank lending, and he's off and running.
Excellent. And that story of being full, also we can translate that back to our property endeavours, because, any HMO that you and I have done, or anyone's done, when you get the surveyor out at the end to do the valuation, not only does it have to be finished, if there's a radiator off the wall, that's not good enough. It has to be on the wall. He will turn the taps on to see if there's water. But equally, you want the best valuation, you need to have them full with ASTs. Now, we would have to back ours up with, here's all the ASTs, but similar concept.
Yeah, exactly same content. It's exactly the same with the hotels. And I do actually trace back what we're doing with hotels to that story in that book, because that's stuck with me. Probably the other 90% of the book has disappeared from my brain, but that 10% bit absolutely stuck with me. And exactly the same with the hotels. It's like we had to prove, I couldn't like put pretend guests in. But when the survey comes, what they want to see the history. So, we just had our system provides all the income figures, and there you go. That's what we did. And then we got our lending based on that income, exactly the same as what he did with care homes. And then, our next stage is, well, how did he scale from one care home to however many he did, and ended up selling a business for 300 million. Now, I'm not saying that's what we want to do, but that's the next bit for us. Is great doing one, awesome. But now you scaling, that's the next bit. But anyway, that's so for Duncan Bannatyne. Love that story. Love his entire story. It's brilliant. And there's a few kind of takeaways from me that I'll just quickly go through. In the second book, he kind of is a bit more of a, the first one's more semi-autobiographical. This one is more kind of, okay, this is what you do. And there's just a couple of things. He gives like a top 10 of why many new businesses fail. And I'm just going to highlight a couple. So first, number one is founders don't do enough research. Okay, so that's him, numbers. He says the number one reason the most business failure is people just take a punt without doing the research. I mean, we were never going to do hotels unless we knew what the numbers were. Another one, he's got kind of similar-ish but opposite. Founders either move too quickly or they move too slowly. Okay, they either get so caught up that they don't build a solid financial base, or they're too slow and miss an opportunity. And the key one, the founders don't understand cash flow. Focusing on profit and loss and not cash flow. That's where a lot of businesses will go under. But anyway, anyone's interested in that story, I would highly, highly recommend his first book and his second book.
Amazing. I'm going to talk about another story-based book, because sometimes they're the easier ones to read, aren't they? When you're brought along on a beginning and a challenge and a middle, and then, the end result, which often when it's a public brand, we kind of have it in our mind anyway. So mine is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is the memoir of Nike. And I've read that a few times. I've listened to it on Audible. And I think the one big takeout for me is perseverance with that book. And, you think, when you think of Nike, you just think of this, mega global brand of huge success. But where he started from and the struggles he had to go through for the first 15 years, it's just constant challenge, lack of cash flow, on the edge of his seat of bankruptcy, but what he did all the way through was he believed in it, and he just persevered, perhaps to the detriment of other things in his life, but, he did it anyway. So perseverance, he was taking risks, innovation, like he brought in the right people. So he had, he was determined to get the coach that he worked with, who his mind was very focused on the product of, creating, taking things apart, literally ripping shoes apart to find out their composition and how that would match with people's running or whatever sport they were analysing at the time. So yeah, the innovation, the negotiation, and the perseverance is absolutely mind-blowing. It's such a good story. I
actually haven't read it. It's been on my bookshelf for ages. I've not actually got around to reading it. And you've said to me loads of times, you've got to read this. It's amazing. And I definitely want to read it. There's a few stories about Nike that I like. The whole Michael Jordan story is amazing. How they kind of he was, there wasn't really a market for basketball, and it just completely transformed his business when managed to get Michael Jordan on board. So yeah, that's definitely one on my list. Is there anything you've taken out of that book specifically that you've applied to your own kind of business?
It is it's the pick you up when things aren't particularly going the way you want them to go at that moment. So he had so many instances where, it came to a Friday and he couldn't pay the wages, or, the factories overseas he knew they were plotting against him to take away Blue Ribbon and, the original brand that he was brought over to America. And, that he just knew all these things were happening, and it was his way of just being single-minded with lots of focus of, I'm not going to let this get the better of me. I've put too much work in to let this fail. and his key perseverance, honestly, it is a masterclass in don't give up.
Yeah. And I think that's a key trait for anyone getting into any kind of business, including property, needs to have, I think, well, because I don't know the story, was he a runner or was he passionate?
Yes.
Jeez. Well,
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so he was already a runner, which is how he knew the coach that then, dissembled the shoes to get them, to the best quality. And then, they were the innovation of the bubble and all of that sort of stuff. So yes, he was a keen runner and a loyal in terms of many of the people that started with him were all like often athletes or, ex-athletes themselves. And then he brought them along, for that whole journey. So, there was also not just a passion for athletics, because that's kind of where it started, but equally a passion for the family of Nike. So, I'm not sure that he was always probably the best leader, because I think, his mind was probably a creative, crazy kind of mind, but equally he knew where his failings would be, and he would bring in someone who, would be able to go off and do the distribution on the East Coast and do this and that. And his leadership was really interesting in this memoir. And, I've watched a couple of films about it as well, and they always give a different slant on things and, a different, I suppose, bias on who had a lot of influence in creating Nike. And it's obviously not just one man at all, but his leadership style was hilarious. He had one employee and he would send him long missives every Friday on all the things that Phil had done wrong or hadn't done properly or what could be improved. And he didn't reply to one of them ever, because he knew it was just that in his eyes, he knew this guy's just wanting to get his ideas off of his chest and ran, and Phil wasn't going to be taking any of it. And he kept saying to him, "No, I'm not even reading these." So dismissive. So, I mean, it wouldn't fly in today's, HR world, but, it's just a really interesting sort of way of looking at things. He wasn't about to please everybody, but he knew what was important for the company. And he did, keep people loyal to him for so long, even during the really hard, lean years, and he met his wife through, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, just perseverance, keeping going, having a focus. The innovation was really interesting as well. I suppose you can relate that back to property in ways, especially around HMOs, because whilst a house is a house, we are buying to the demand of whatever we're going to do with that house. So if you're doing flips, then there is a little bit of innovation in there, because you've got to think of the way that people live, nowadays, and what they actually want from a house. It's not just, it doesn't have that base level of just, a roof over your heads anymore. It's a feeling it gives you.
Yeah.
So you've got to tap into that and to whatever your target market is going to be. But equally in HMOs, it's your HMO is the best in the market the day you finish it, and the day after it isn't anymore because someone else's is. And, innovation in multi-let and co-living is probably the most out of all of the different strategies, I'd say, because the way people live and work change. So, we started our HMOs, back in whenever 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and 6 small rooms and a couple of bathrooms was good, especially if you painted them really nicely and, made the kitchen look great. And then within no years at all, it was suddenly en suites. And then it was, separate laundry rooms. And then it's actually, there's almost a co-working space for people. And sometimes there'll be gyms, if they're bigger HMOs. So that innovation moves at a pace, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does. I was thinking it's like, he wasn't the first person to invent trainers. He wasn't, I think a lot of people who haven't read it think, Nike were probably the first. They weren't the first to do trainers, but he just applied innovation to it and applied his passion for running to make particular running trainers, and then went into basketball and all these kind of things. But yeah, it's like, again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can build on what people have done before and then put your own slant on it and enhance. You're not starting from zero. You're starting much higher up than that, but just, I said, using that innovation to push the market on. As you say, like HMO is a great example, because I did my first HMO in Birmingham 2012, And that was 6 beds, 2 bathrooms. And literally by the time I did the next one, that was a dead market.
Yeah.
Had to be en suite. So yeah, that really changed. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's an amazing story. Lots of key takeouts from his personality. And also I just love the way he knows. He definitely is one of those guys that he got the right people into the right jobs around him, and he trusted them, and he let them go off and do what they needed to do. So, that's also an important analogy for property, in that, you can't be a lone wolf in property. You have to have a great network around you of people that are going to help you, from the buy-in through to the refinance into the managing of the tenant or whatever your exit might be. So your finance and mortgage brokers are your best friends, your lawyers, your best friend, all of these different things. But equally, your cohorts are your best friends as well, because they're the ones that will, give you lots of new learnings and keep you up when things are a bit of a challenge.
I think, honestly, it's one of the things I would try and change. If I could wave a magic wand and change people's mindset instantly, it would be to get out of that I've got to do this all myself into I need as many good people around me as I can get. That shift in mindset is just absolutely massive. And I think it takes people too long to get there. I think back to when I started, it took me and Caroline too long to get there before we realized we needed to be in networks and we needed to be around people that were more successful than us and doing things we weren't doing that could help bring us up, and to collaborate with and to just be around and network with and have fun with and all these kinds of things. I think so many people at the beginning think, oh, I've got to do all this on my own, and they're all just in their own head. And it's just like, I just want to change that. So yeah.
So let's move on, because we are rambling about these books because we're so passionate about them. So I'm going to take you down to just one more, Nick. So choose between the two that you had, and you're just going to allow to talk to one of them.
I'm going to go to an old school book. Obviously, I'm going to have to reference Rich Dad Poor Dad, because that kind of did kick off everything. But Rich Dad Poor Dad is a bit kind of, the original one anyway, is a bit kind of stories and not much of actual doing, if you know what I mean. Apart from the key bit I took about from that, if anyone hasn't read it, I do encourage you to go read it. But the cash flow diagram, where it shows about earning money from assets, not from income. Yeah. That is literally one page of that book is a thing that probably changed everything for me. But I wanted more of a how-to, as in, right, okay, great, I get the concept now. I understand I need assets, but how do I actually go do this? Right. And it's probably this book that really started the how to actually do it for me. So it's called the Buy-to-Let Bible. It's an old one, a guy called AJ Ahuja. And this was written, I think, must have been 2002, first edition. I think this is the 2005 edition. So 20 years old, a bit more than that. But the principles in this book are still absolutely current. And what this taught me was, when I first started looking at property and I was looking at kind of working out cash flows and yields and things, I read this book and it said how to achieve a higher return of 12%. And I was like, what? Everything I was looking at was like 5, 6%. And this guy's talking about as standard 12. And it's like, well, how do you do that? How on earth do you find properties that are yield 12%? And essentially what he does goes into exactly the mindset of a proper investor, right? And it really shows the difference between an amateur mindset in property and a professional mindset in property. And we talk about this obviously a lot. The amateur mindset is, I'm going to go and buy a nice flat in a nice part of town, rent it to the nice professional tenants, and that's what I want to do. That's how I'm going to go do buy to let. And he's like, no, that's amateur. Professionals, they go buy low value property in areas where there's high tenant demand. But you're talking about cheaper housing stock. He was talking here about buying houses at like 30, 40K. And I'm like, I was living in London at that time. I'm like, it's ridiculous. You can't find houses.
Well, it was made up.
Yeah. But then he talks about which areas you've got to go to and real examples. And I started looking, it's like, actually, blimey, you can. And you can still today buy houses 50, 60, 70K, depending on where you're looking, and make those 12% returns, yields. So that for me was the eye opener of actually in the UK, how do you do this? How do you become a professional investor, and how can you scale? Because I was meeting people that had 20, 30 properties. I'm like, if I'm buying a flat for 200 grand, how am I getting 20 of them? But actually, when you're buying houses at 40 grand, suddenly you can see how it can be done.
Yeah, it moves 5 times quicker almost immediately, doesn't it?
Exactly, but you can still make the same return. So that was the biggest eye opener for me in terms of pure property investing, was get out of the old amateur mindset into a proper professional investor mindset. What the actual real life investors doing, that's the kind of stuff they're buying, and this is still valid today. So that I credit with helping us do, I think we did 15 cheap buy-to-lets in our first 12 months, having got trained properly.
Yeah. And, we were talking a few episodes ago about buy-to-let hotspot areas. And, we were talking about some of bigger numbers than 12, it's just creeping over the 12 for areas within your homeland of Scotland.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, he actually in this, but this is obviously 20 years old now, but, he does do a list, and I can see my little marks. I've put little marks down there. What kind of areas to look at. Lincoln being one of them. I believe that's in our hotspots guide.
That Lincoln.
There it is, ticked off down there,
Yeah.
Lincoln. So 20 years ago, Lincoln was, on the radar, still is. What else did I put? I've got like Grays in Essex, parts of London.
That ship has sailed.
That ship has sailed. I've starred Burton-on-Trent, Staffordshire, Dudley, West Midlands, parts of Birmingham, Rugby, still valid. I've got lots of ticks. Wolverhampton, what have I got? Tyne Ware, Hartlepool, Gateshead. A lot of these places will still work quite comfortably.
There you go, 22 decades on. And the Buy-to-Let Bible is still very relevant.
Very relevant, yeah. But for anyone disbelieving that you can buy properties at those kind of prices, go actually do the research and you'll see that you can. Yeah. And if anyone wants, actually to see, well, how can I go and build a portfolio of buy-to-lets? What mindset is the correct mindset? That for me was an absolute stop doing all the things you think are going to work and just do that.
Perfect. So my final book I'm going to talk about is one by Brendon Burchard. He's an American author, and his book is High Performance Habits. So I'm going to show it there.
Rick's copy, do not remove.
I know. And do you know what? I can't remove that, Nick, because it's stuck on so badly now that it would just leave a terrible mess if I tried to pick it off. So thanks, Rick, for stickering up my book. Anyway, it's not even his, it's mine. But there we go. Separate issue altogether. So you and I, Nick, are both quite practical. So we like, we don't mind a story within a book. That's all well and good. But we also quite like the practical, right, and now go and do this.
Yes.
And, that type of that instruction and guidance, which is taking a higher level concept thing and actually giving you a roadmap towards it. And that's what I really enjoyed about Brendon Burchard's book. So basically what that book is around is that he's done an awful lot of research on, high performing people within business generally. And, what do they do? Are there common themes around all of these different people that he's done a whole load of research on? Is there common themes on how they act every day? And if there are, can we bring that into certain things that everyone can then start to do? Because he basically says it's not about personality or talent. It's about good habits and consistency on those, those habits. So as I say, lots of research behind it, which satisfied my analytical mind because, I do like a little bit of numbers. So as soon as he said, I've done lots of research and it's all statistically significant, I was like, I'm in. Okay, you've got me. And then basically what he does is he's got some other sort of resources as well, which is like journals where you can, fill in every day based on the research that he's done and what those habits are. So I'm just going to read it a bit from those. So he's basically done it into 6 habits. So we've got things like clarity. So I know my why and I live intentionally by that why for today. So it's going into every day and saying, well, what is my why for today? How does it resonate with my overall why? And am I intentionally living that clarity by the things that I'm actually doing during the day? Productivity. So have I worked on the things that have mattered most today? So it's things like, What tasks should be absolutely be done by the end of today? People I need to connect with to be able to achieve those tasks. So I think everyone is guilty at some point of starting their day and thinking, right, well, I've got to get that done, that done, and that done. And then an email pops in and it is either, it could be urgent, but is it urgent and important? Or it could be important, but actually it's not urgent. And actually there could be some that are in there that are not important and not urgent, but they look like a little bit of fun and a distraction for your brain. And you head off to that direction. And before you know it, you start, down a rabbit hole of good fun, but it's not actually going to get you where you wanted. It doesn't have the clarity and your productivity is down. So this approach really keeps you on focus. So we've got clarity, productivity, energy. Have I managed my mental and physical energy well? So he kind of takes not just the business side of things, but also the, how it works for you as an individual and how you can manage your emotions. So things that like morning mindset that he might go through would be, think of a situation that might stress me out or trip me up today. And if I was to think of my best self, how would I approach that and deal with it? So in the morning, look at what could come along and derail you and think in your best frame of mind, if that came along, what am I going to do about it? So that if it does come along, you've already got a roadmap of, I anticipated that this could happen. And these are the things that I'm going to do to not let that derail my day. So I loved that whole energy part of it. Influence. So how well did I guide or treat others today? And, this comes back to what we spoke about with, Shoe Dog, where, I was talking about the way he interacted with his team and with, certain suppliers. So, it is one of those in property, we need to have certain people around us. If you're going through an HMO inspection, you need to know that you're going to get on with that HMO inspector. You need to understand that part of it. You need to understand the financing. So who is it that I need to connect with and guide to get the most out of it? Or if you're, scaling up your serviced accommodation business and you've got a VA that you've just taken on from overseas who is helping you do things, that person needs your input. How do you connect with them to make them do the best for your business? So again, I thought that was quite an interesting one. So we've got clarity, productivity, energy and influence so far. Then the last two is necessity. So I felt it was necessary to be my best and made success a must. So it's that, how urgent is this for me? Like, do I really want this? So again, another bit of a mindset one. And then the final one is courage. I shared my real self, thoughts and feelings today. And I think that courage one, is, what he does identify as things that high performing people will take risks. So have you got that courage to do it? But obviously we're going back to that with, the due diligence that, like Duncan Bannatyne would have spoken about, all the numbers behind it. So it's not just risk taking for the sake of risk taking. There's science behind it all.
I think that's such an important one. So there's a lot of people out there that really want to do something and just fail to get something going. And then that just leads to massive frustration. You're just storing up frustration down the line because you're constantly looking back going, oh, God, I wish I'd bought a property 10 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever. So that I think is such a key one. It's just the courage to start, do something, take some action that is going to move you forward, towards your vision or towards, for your why, whatever it is. It's just that, okay, I've got to get going. And that's, I think, where the network and everything can help, is to give, show you real examples of how people have done that, taken the action, been successful, and that they can too.
I love this book because it has got that practical element in it. So, he was talking about CEOs who obviously have to wear so many different hats during the day. And, 1 minute they'll be talking about marketing, then they'll be talking about finance, then they'll be talking about HR. They're responsible for the whole gamut of the big organizations that they might be leading. And productivity wise, they've only got so much in a day to talk. And obviously they've got big teams and part of their success is getting the best teams around them. But, if you've got, think of all of our world leaders, they've got meetings to go to and it's like 20 minutes, got to go there. And then I might be talking about that. I might be talking about world peace. And then the next minute, I'm going to be talking about, I don't know, the state of infrastructure in a certain part of the country. Very different hats, very different mindsets. And he gives practical tips on just literally, right, do this in your head, say these words to get yourself out of that head so that you're fully present in your next focus. And I think that's important for property as well, especially for those of us who are not full-time property and, you're managing family, a full-time career, else outside of property, as well as trying to build up your property portfolio on the side as well, because you're very conflicted in the different things that you're doing during the day. And we can allow off sometimes the most noisy one to take over. So it is full of practical tips on that as well.
Fab. Okay, that's another one for my reading list. Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to have to do another episode because I've got so many more books. So we'll probably come back and visit this in a few weeks' time and we'll do some more. But if anyone's got any feedback on those, please do get in contact with us. Let us know what your favourite books are, what's helped you. Sarah, how can everyone get hold of us or even meet us in person?
Yeah, so absolutely. Head over to social media. We are on This Property Life on Insta. We're on Facebook and all of those guys as well. But Insta's probably the best one to find us on. You can meet us in person next month. We are now in March, and at the end of April, we will be having our quarterly network meetup.
Yeah.
For anyone in property that is active, aspiring, doing great things, that wants to inspire others and also be inspired. Format of our network days is really just about you doing business in the room. So we have guest speakers who will give you information and educate and inspire you. We also have roundtables where you can talk to those guys. We can, it's about basically the power of the people in the room and learning from each other. So very much a casual, friendly environment where you can meet other people and not let property be so lonely.
Yeah, fab. And that's on April 26th. Saturday.
April 26th in London. Yes.
Yeah, cool.
And if you want to be part of that, head over to our website, thispropertylife.co.uk, click on the membership and you can sign up from there. And we would love to meet you in April.
Brilliant. Well, I've enjoyed that. We could have talked about that all day, I feel. So I definitely think we will revisit that a bit further down the line, get some more. But yeah, fantastic. Great to speak to you again, Sarah. And we will see everyone very soon.
Thanks, Nick.